Thanks so much for watching today. As a reminder, you can always subscribe to this YouTube channel, or if you'd like, you can go and like my Facebook page. Just do a search for Prep Talk with Jim, and you can like that. And if you're on Facebook a lot, whenever the new video comes out for the week, it'll notify you there in Facebook. All right, let's look ahead and see what's going on this week. We are continuing in the unit entitled Second Nature. As a reminder, we're examining 7 Bible characters and some of their characteristics that as we grow and mature in Christ, it should become second nature to us. Well, we're in week 3. We're looking at Ruth and all in commitment out of the book of Ruth, chapter 1, verses 8 through 18. And the point of the lesson is that Christ-centered living chooses commitment, not convenience. Well, that point should strike home for a lot of folks in your church, shouldn't it? I know we live in a world of increasing convenience. People tend to be committed to the things that bring them immediate pleasure, not long-term satisfaction. You know, your church may be like ours. We can have a sign up for an event and money is due for camp and put a particular due date on that. And it can get right up to the date, and there will be a few that will sign up or pay the deposit or whatever, but it can get to the date and even a week after that deadline date. And people are calling and asking, is it too late to get in? Because people don't commit. They wait and see what the best options for them are. Well, I particularly like the book of Ruth, probably mainly because it's my wife's name, something I discovered a few years ago that I think is kind of neat. I don't know why I thought of this, but I was looking in the table of contents and noticed that Ruth is the 8th book of the Bible. And if you go to the back at Revelation and count back 8 books, you get to James, which is my legal name. So anyway, I guess it was meant to be, wasn't it? Well, let's do a little quick background to see what happened in these first 7 verses before we get to Ruth chapter 1, verse 8. So we have Naomi and her husband, Elimelech, and they have 2 sons. And they live in Bethlehem. A famine comes, and so in order to survive, they go across the Jordan River into the country of Moab. Their sons married Moabite women. Those women's names were Naomi and Orpah. Comes along, all 3 men die. Elimelech, the 2 sons, so that leaves 3 widows, Naomi and her 2 daughters-in-law. And Naomi decides she's going to return back to Bethlehem because the famine is over. And that's where we pick up the story in verse 8 of chapter 1. So Naomi tells them to stay, tells the daughter-in-laws to stay, to go back to their homes of origin. As a side note, it seems that Naomi was looking out for the 2 girls, and she probably was, but you've also got to remember from Naomi's standpoint, she's never been in Bethlehem with these girls before, with these Moabite women. They would have been a constant reminder to Naomi that Naomi and her husband left the promised land for a pagan land. It would have been a constant reminder that they left a land of promise for a land of compromise. And it would have been a constant reminder that her sons were dead. And so it could be that she was wanting to leave them behind to kind of help erase those 10 years, maybe not erase it, but kind of alleviate some of the pain from her memory. So anyway, she tells them to stay. Well, the tears start flowing, and they say, no, we're going to go with you. And then she tells them that the prospects of them finding a husband are going to be much better in their homeland, in the land of Moab, than if they were to go back to Bethlehem. Then she makes a statement about, I don't have any other sons, and even if I were to get married today, you'd still have to wait a couple of decades, basically is what she's saying, in order to get married. And what's that about? Well, in Deuteronomy chapter 25, verses 5 through 10, God lays out a plan for widows to be provided for. And that provision was that the deceased brother was to take in the widow as his wife and take and provide and care for her. But Naomi did not have any sons, and so that was not a possibility. It's very impractical. So we get along in the story. Orpah, she cried a little bit more, but she decides, I'm going to go back home. But Ruth, however, clung to Naomi. We get down to verses 16 and 17, and we have a couple of very familiar, famous verses, I think. They're used quite a bit. I've used it in wedding ceremonies. But here, originally, it's not for the love expressed between a man and a woman, but between a daughter-in-law to her mother-in-law. And this is a point in Ruth's life that's going to alter the rest of her life. She said, I'm going to be with you, Naomi. I'm going to be with you, my mother-in-law. And it even says, where you're buried, I will be buried. Now, in ancient thought, not Jewish thought, but just ancient lands, Moab and such, where you're buried determines your afterlife. So she's making a huge commitment here to Naomi and for forever, basically. I'm committed to you no matter what. And if I break this commitment, may your God deal with me ever so severely. You've probably heard the saying that when the going gets tough, the tough gets going. Well, in our day and time, it's more like when the going gets tough, the weak just go. But that was not the case with Ruth. She was neither weak and she didn't go. She stayed and clung to her mother-in-law, Naomi. Even if there's no prospect of me finding another husband, I'm going to go with you. Now, let's remember the culture. Women, including and especially widows, relied on men to provide a living. So Ruth is saying, I'm going to take my chances as a widow with another older widow, my mother-in-law, because I love and am committed to her. So there's so many areas of application for this lesson this week. We can just look at marriage and the commitment that to stay committed and not just look for convenience. Church membership. How often do you have in your churches where people kind of come until they're either disgruntled a little bit or there's a better program down the street, and church membership ebbs and flows. A couple of months ago, my 10th year at First Baptist Church at Whitehall, and that is fairly unusual for a minister to stay that long in a church. But even in the secular world, people are changing jobs, just using it as a stepladder one after the other. There's not that much commitment anymore to an organization. All right, let me give you a couple of other areas of application that I think might be beneficial. One is that it's easy to commit to something in the heat of the moment. We look at Orpah and look at what she did. In the heat and the emotion of the moment, I don't know if she didn't mean it or she was just so filled with emotion, but she didn't keep her commitment. And that's a reason that I'm very cautious when it comes with children and salvation. At Vacation Bible School or during children's church, children can be easily manipulated. So we have to be very careful that they don't make decisions. I put that in quotation marks. They don't make a decision in the heat of the moment because the friend's doing it or whatever else is going on in their lives. But we need to make sure that they really mean it. Another area of application, I believe, is that our commitments that we make should reflect our commitments we have to God. God tells us everything we do to do it as we're doing it to the Lord. And I believe commitments fall right in there. Ecclesiastes 5:5 says that it's better to not make a vow than to make one and to break it. Have you ever known a person who constantly commits to things but never follows through? God is committed to us. He's shown that he's faithful, he's trustworthy. His commitment to us is never failing. And so our commitment that we make to other people should be as unfailing, should be as trustworthy. I really think that's why God hates divorce, because it's a reflection of a broken relationship. Now, let's look on one more area of application, and it really ties in with the point of the lesson. And that is that I really believe God is not interested in our convenience, but our commitment. And our commitment often involves more than involvement, but sacrifice. You've probably heard the fable of the chicken and the pig, and the argument would be who contributes the most to the breakfast plate. Of course, the chicken was involved, but the pig sacrificed. All right. Well, speaking of commitment, you'll notice that I'm wearing my Arkansas Razorback t-shirt today because I am committed to the team, even when it's not a winning season. So anyway, so I'm off to South Carolina this week to see the grand boys, and I am so looking forward to that. I know I'm fortunate we live in an age of FaceTime, but still there's nothing like being there with those kiddos. So I won't be teaching this week, but I'm hoping that your class goes well. So don't forget to pray for your class, and you can see me next week.